Happy emancipation to all Guyanese living here in Guyana and for those in the diaspora. Today, we want to celebrate our progress, not only here in Guyana, but all across the world. It has always been recognized that Blacks have always made a sterling contribution to development in all aspects of life. And for that, we want to commend all of the Black leaders here in Guyana and across the world for all of their sterling contribution as we move forward to integrate within the global society and lift the people of the world as a whole. My name is Hugh Todd, and today joining us is a very distinguished panel, a panel of African Guyanese, or Guyanese of African descent, I should say. Took me a little while to get that out. First, I want to introduce our Prime Minister-elect, Brigadier Retired Mark Phillips. Thank you, sir, for joining us. I'd like to also introduce Mr. Joe Hamilton, former MP and national candidate for the People's Progressive Party Civic. Alongside him, also, I'd like to introduce Mr. Steve Ninvalle, who is a former MP and national candidate as well. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this momentous occasion.
Hi, Hugh. Good afternoon, and good afternoon, colleagues, and all our brothers and sisters. Happy emancipation and emancipation greetings to all Guyana.
How are you? Good day. And to Joe and Steve, good day to you too, and to the wider Guyanese viewership. Happy emancipation to all.
Thank you very much for having me on the program. To Brigadier Mark Phillips, Joe Hamilton, distinguished panel that we have for this program today, and to all Guyanese in the diaspora and wherever you are, and to all people of African descent, I want to say very happy Emancipation Day.
Thank you, gentlemen. Whilst the topic can be very broad in scope, because if we're talking about the Black development across the world, we can go on for hours, but we want to focus here today on the contribution to development here in Guyana. And I want to begin by us reflecting on the struggles of our parents to the development of Guyana. And that is your opening remarks. And I'll leave with you, Joe.
For me, I think this opportunity given to us today as we celebrate emancipation, as you mentioned, we should reflect, we must reflect. But for me, our reflection should not be on this program about the brutality of slavery and the oppression.
Yes.
I would want to spend some time speaking to emancipation and after slavery. What did happen? And in my humble opinion, after emancipation, our forebearers set out deliberately prioritizing how they would move forward. And in my view, they utilized three elements to take us to where we are at this moment. That is work, the importance of work. Secondly, ownership. And we will dwell into that some more, ownership of property. And thirdly, education. The four of us on this program today, we are prime example of what education can do for ordinary people of African descent. None of us. I know enough of you gentlemen to know that you didn't born with gold spoon in your mouth. Likewise, I myself, humble country boy born at Bedouin tribe. And today we are reputable, credible people in this society. And it is because we paid attention to education. And therefore, In that three priority our forebearers set out, I think for us going forward, we have to return to those three elements. And I suspect that in the 21st century, at this juncture, for all that has happened, and we would speak to them, we have to return to what I would call today emancipation, a second emancipation. And that is where, for me, our focus should be as we pay attention to emancipation, the contribution of our parents, and going forward, what must be done to ensure that we give service and we participate in the development of this beautiful country of ours called Guyana.
Thank you very much for that, Joe. You mentioned work, ownership, and education, all three that are very vital to one's development, not only at the personal level, but at the family, society as a whole. PM-elect, your thoughts on the reflection?
Well, on my knowledge of the African Guyanese experience, especially in the post-emancipation era, as Joe mentioned, while we may have moved away from the sugar plantation, we still remained in agriculture, because many African Guyanese develop their own little homestead or farms, as you may want to call it. They get into planting their own produce for their own use and also for trade in a small way within the villages that they establish. And as I mentioned, villages, it's important to note that the village movement in Guyana basically started with the African Guyanese, who purchased land after they became freed and established villages, throughout the length and breadth of Guyana. So we still remain in agriculture. We still are hardworking people. African Guyanese were involved in mining. The gold mining in Guyana. Involvement of African Guyanese there. When they planted their crops, they went into the gold mining areas to seek their fortune.
Knockers.
Turn home.
Yeah.
Education. African Guyanese became the schoolmasters, the famous schoolmasters in Guyana, the nurses, in Guyana, the doctors. So we saw a real blossoming of African Guyanese in the post-emancipation era in all aspects of business and development in Guyana. They held senior appointments to the public service in Guyana, in the police force, in the area of security and defense in Guyana. So what we had in the post-emancipation era was African Guyanese taking their place in all aspects of work, all aspects of development, and all aspects of social life in Guyana. And that is what we want to celebrate today as we, as we embark on another period of celebration of African emancipation. The success of the African Guyanese, in the development of Guyana.
Yes. Thank you for that, PM-elect. Steve, your thoughts on the...
Well, thank you very much again. Coming off Joe and the PM-elect, I'm put in a very tight spot because they would have touched on most of the things that I would have wanted to more or less touch. But it's important for us to note as a people that the abolition and emancipation are two different things. And when we would have achieved, when slavery was abolished, there was a system of apprenticeship that more or less was, basic slavery again by another name. But it's when we had emancipation that the former enslaved were really able to take control of the labor force, which was pivotal and part and parcel of the reason why there was indentureship, and we brought our Indian brothers and sisters from India because of the fact that the planters did not control the labor force anymore after emancipation. It's important for us as a people to understand, to note, to underline that, as Joe rightfully said, education remains our key. Because in my humble view, you're not educated, you're still part and parcel enslaved, in my humble view. And I've been able to see that over the years, we have been able to come over every little hurdle. There's still some that we're trying to climb over. But when you look back, you can still applaud the efforts that were employed by our ancestors to bring us to where we are at the moment. Joe and the PM-elect have already spoken on a couple of other points that I would have wanted to amplify, but that is my opening statement.
Yeah. Thank you, gentlemen. And we must commend all of our Guyanese of African descent who have struggled hard and long to help to develop and move this country forward. And we cannot thank them enough for their contribution. Because of them, we were able to be in a position where we can actually keep that legacy going. And to add to that, we have been very integral in the struggles for a free and democratic society. As we all know, when we got emancipated and we moved through the decades and the era, it came a point in time when we recognized that we needed to have our own independence to be able to lead our own destiny. And we did that alongside our Indian brothers and sisters, Portuguese, mixed race, everyone huddled together to move Guyana forward. But our contribution cannot be understated when it comes to our democratic struggles. And I want us to look at that from the perspective of our Guyanese of African descent who would have struggled hard and long for our freedom. Pointedly, persons like C.V. Noons, Ridley Ben, Cyril Belgrave, and also Dr. Roger Luncheon. I would like to start with you again, Joe.
The thing is here is that as Mark mentioned, it is not just in Guyana. Education has taken people of African descent who are Guyanese. I mean, every part of this world you can go, and you will find hundreds, thousands of people of African descent serving in the highest strata of society and corporate governance. People of humble beginnings. And that's why, as Steve said, the issue of education is fundamental and pivotal to where we have gotten and how we will get further. You mentioned some of the people who served at the highest level in the PPP and its government over time. You know, the first education minister, I think, in the PPP civic government was a Baronian like myself, E.M.G. Wilson, or they call Coco Wilson, of African descent. So in the Brindley Ben and then and coming forward, you mentioned Dr. Luncheon, you Collymore, the service they have given to Guyana, a man of humble beginnings, you know, and the service he has given. As a young boy, I know the service he was giving to the PPP, fighting against dictatorship and oppression. You know, you're riding on a motorbike across the length and breadth of this country, serving the People's Progressive Party at that time. And so imagine you spoke to what's his name that died not so long ago, who was worked as a stevedore and had to be a PPP. Belgrave had to be a PPP of African descent, serving in that environment. Had to be a PPP of African descent, living in Guyana on the south of Georgetown. Shirley Melville, Shirley Edwards, rather. Yep. So think about it. You know, from time to time, all of us, the four of us, we think we are fetching a lot of weight, but we have no weight to fetch.
Yes.
Think about 4 decades ago, Belgrave and Shirley Edwards and Billy Bell and those people operating in the society, in the center of the city and being PPP. And so I say to my PPP brothers of African descent, the young ones that have come on board, you're not fetching any weight. Just go back in time and history and you would understand the weight that our forebearers in the PPP I'm talking about, they had to fetch to help to develop this country of ours, and what they had to face and what they had to fight against. As much that we have to deal with these people here, this is Sunday school to what they had to deal with at that time, so to speak. But the important thing, as mentioned by both of my colleagues, education, education, education. How it has helped. And let me expand education in the sense of, because all of us would have gone to Sunday school, I'm sure. Our parents didn't focus on just academic education. They focused also on social and religious education because they wanted us to be well-rounded citizens. People that will know wrong and right. People that will know good and bad. People that would know on simple things. They taught us that, listen, it must be useful to be in your vocabulary the words like please, excuse me, you know, those simple things.
Thank you.
Issues, and those words were part of a vocabulary. That's why today I grimace, and it pains me when you see people who should know better, who take position of wrong and want to make it right, who take position of bad and want to make it good. People who are steeped in religion and they must know better, who today, for whatever reason, suggest to us that banality and evil doing can be explained away. I mean, sometimes it becomes frustrating because we know that we were taught differently. We know we were taught to do things better. And PM, you would remember in the early days, right up, I think, to GCE, they had a subject named religious knowledge. That is how important it was to our forebearers that our religious upbringing, I mean, we can debate whether stripping us of our cultural identity and Christianizing us, whether it was good or bad. That is not the conversation today. But the point is, within that Western religious Christian upbringing, we were taught some good things. And that is what I think we have to return to in the education fabric. It is not just academic education. It is also social education, for want of a better word, religious education in large measure, knowing right from wrong, good from bad, not at all to extol injustice. And the movement for freedom in this country started with our forebearers. So we have an obligation to fight for freedom. We have an obligation to fight for the right to vote. It started with our forebearers. We have an obligation to fight for those things. So those who attempt to knock us for fighting for those things, it is they that are on the wrong side. What did Coffee fought for? Freedom, justice, Damon, and we can go down the line. Hubert Nathaniel Critchlow. We have established and put a bust and statue in their name to fight against justice, democracy, and freedom is to deface and debase the name of these men. That is what it is. And let me say this. No amount of, and I'm saying this in passing, no amount of burning candles at the feet of Coffee, no amount of drum beating and prostrating ourselves at the parade ground, and no amount of burning incense at the Seven Ponds would help us going forward. No among those things. Though, in my view, those are irrelevancies at this juncture in the development of the people of African descent. They are irrelevancies. PM, you spoke earlier about farming. And we could have only done farming by purchasing lands. And so today, there is a Denamstel and a Stanley Town over the West Coast, and there is a Triumph and BV and Pleasance and Buxton and Anns Grove and Victoria and Golden Grove, because our forbearance saved money and purchased those places and established governance structure to govern them. And that is the reason why I started out by saying that the three elements is work, property ownership, and education, as all of us touched on. And as we go on, we can look at how we do a paradigm shift, utilizing those three elements in the 21st century.
Yeah. Thank you for that expansive view on our struggles for free and liberated society. PM-elect, your thoughts on our foreparents and our brothers who will struggle for a free and democratic society here in Guyana. Your mic, unmute your mic, PM.
As mentioned before, the moral education is important. The academic education is important. And by the way, the moral education includes decency, integrity, and honesty.
Yes.
You know, that's the gist of the moral education that we were brought up with. You know, the academic education, of course, was aimed towards us taking our place in society and contributing to the development of our society, and of course, our personal development. You know, and based on that trust, you know, here is a set of people who were uneducated at the time of emancipation. And, you know, in less than 100 years, we were exporting, you know, exporting nurses, lawyers, teachers, and doctors to the wider Caribbean and the wider world, you know, to the point where you go to any Caribbean country, any part of the world, and you see Guyanese, you know, Guyanese who, from humble beginnings, as Joe mentioned, in Guyana, are now holding their own at universities. You know, they're heads of departments or presidents of universities. You know, they're head teachers. In other countries, having contributed in Guyana, they moved on. In other countries, they're nurses, they're doctors, you know, they're judges. Only last week I was reading about a Guyanese, you know, who served as a judge throughout the Caribbean, including parts of Africa. You know, and these are the things that the African Guyanese must be recognized for. We're people who came out of emancipation. We're people who focus on all the areas that we mentioned before, especially education. And we are people who contributed not only to the development of Guyana, but to the development of the wider Caribbean and many countries in the world. And we must be proud of that. And we must maintain our focus on education. Education, to my mind, is linked to emancipation. It's linked to freedom. At no time must the African Guyanese decide that education is not important. You know, we came from a culture where one generation placed a lot of effort in ensuring the next generation is better than that previous generation in terms of education. And therefore, you have a case of people who were uneducated, and in that same home, in one generation, they produce lawyers, they produce doctors, they produce teachers, and they continue to build on that. And that is part of our culture, and we must, regardless of how poor we are, we must maintain that focus on ensuring the next generation is better than this generation, as it pertains to education, as it pertains to their own personal development. That must be an important focus for us. And where we are today, in keeping with what Sir Isaac Newton did mention many years ago, if I am seeing far or I've achieved a lot today, is because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. We are standing, or we stood on the shoulders of giants. Many of them were mentioned before by Joe. You know, the Brindley Ben, the CV News, you know, the EMG Wilson,
Yeah.
the Cyril Belgrave, the Clinton Collymore, right? The Roger Luncheon, the Samuel Hines. Those are our giants. And we, the African Guyanese today, must stand on their shoulders and see further and contribute to taking Guyana further in terms of the development of this country.
Yes. Thank you for that, PM-elect. Steve, your thoughts?
Yeah, just short. You know, it's important that we note that, and after this, I would just want to go back to something very, very important that Joe mentioned, that the advent of slavery is one of the pillars of racism. And that is something that our foreparents fought against. And it's important that we understand that, because there is still a fight. There is still a fight for freedom. And as Joe rightly mentioned, that this freedom was fought for by Atta and Kofi and all of these people. And we find that right now, there is still a battle going on. And you're either on the side of right, or you're on the side of wrong. We, as a nation, and especially our African Guyanese brothers and sisters, it is important that we understand what is right and what is wrong. And the vehicle that will take us is education. And we cannot overemphasize, we cannot overflog, but this is something that needs to be injected into our young African brothers and sisters, that education is the key to take us and to open the doors that we will want to see open. It will not be open without that.
Thank you very much for that, Steve. In closing, gentlemen, because we just have a few minutes left, and this is for us looking forward as Guyanese of African descent. Guyana is a very precious and dear country to us, and we all want to see Guyana move forward. So what I want you to do is to give us your thoughts going forward on how you would advise Guyanese of African descent, especially young Guyanese who are in dire need of good leadership. And here I'm talking about leadership wherever it's at. Because many Guyanese of African descent believe that you can only look for leadership if they share the same ethnic makeup as you are. But because we are a plural, multiracial society, we have to come together as one, and we have to focus on what is right and what is wrong. Joe, I'll leave it to you again.
Importantly, this second emancipation in 21st century, colleagues and viewers, as indicated by all of us, our forebears took us from abject poverty and took us to where. Now, the important thing is how we monetize academic qualifications. I think that is where we're at. And the project has to be, how do we ensure that our young engineers together can pool their talent and their resources and form companies going forward? How our young doctors can pool their talent and resources and seek to say, let me establish a hospital.
Yes.
Those are monetizing. Steve, you're involved a lot in the area, and you work in the area of culture and arts and sports. How do our people monetize that skill, that talent? And that is where we're at. And that is where, in my view, the focus has to be. And let me say this for persons who might say Hamilton is dreaming. I can give a classic example of monetizing skill in the field, the medical. I have known Dr. Gordon Boyle and Karen Boyle, that today owns Eureka Laboratory on Thomas Street. I know them when they started under a bottom house at Swansea Building. I know them as young people in the last 25 years. I saw them grow a company. I taught IT to Dr. Boyle, so Karen Boyle. So intimately, I know these two people. And I have seen them grow a company, utilizing their skill and their training and their profession, starting, as I said, under a bottom house. And they have today, in my view, the laboratory of substance outside of the hospital laboratory in this country. So it has been done, monetizing your second issue, PM touched on some, agriculture and the activities of agriculture. In my view, again, we have to think broadly about agriculture. Again, pooling our resources like our foreparents did and bought those plantations. And we have to pool our lands together and focus, in my view, on plantation type agriculture that is mechanized. Subsistence agriculture will not work for our village economy in this period. So again, it would call for unity of purpose. And thirdly, and most importantly, I think Steve and you mentioned leadership, and I think PM. I would say to young people of African descent who are listening to me today, you have to seek to establish new forward-looking Afrocentric organizations. The ones that attempted to serve us and people who now say they speak in our name, they have failed us. And therefore, you young people listening to me today, you have to do it, and you have to do it in a different way. You have to formulate organizations that speaks to the issue of, I would say, fact. That is finance, arts, culture, and training. Training in large measure in information technology, the sciences, engineering, the culture and arts of it got to be monetized. So for me, that is the project. That is the new, the emancipation, the second emancipation, looking forward. And I hope that all of us who are listening to me today, we would think about these things and to see how together, as people of African descent, we can pool all our talents and our resources together to put in place the type of project that will develop us, as PM said, and contribute to the development of this country, great country that we call Guyana.
Thank you very much for that, Joe. PM-elect. Please unmute your mic, PM. Yeah.
All of us agree on the importance of education, but in my final comments, I want to make the point that education is important, but it must not only be education for employment. As you mentioned here, it must be education for entrepreneurship, you know, and as we are on education for entrepreneurship, is important also that we be educated so we could practice better personal financial management. Very important for us as a people. It's good to have education and get a good job and, you know, to start a good business, but financial management, very important for us. Education must also focus on building a freer society. As Joe mentioned, we are a multicultural society, multi-ethnic society, and we must focus on contributing, not around being Afrocentric, but we must be focused also on contributing towards the building of this multicultural, multi-ethnic society, because Guyana will continue as long as we remain as a state to be a multicultural, multi-ethnic society. And we must focus on making our contribution and on leading in that society. Ethnic and social cohesion is important. Promoting this cultural diversity, as I mentioned, is important. And we must show leadership in that area too. Another important matter for the young people of Guyana. Yes, we have free education in Guyana, you know, and we're talking about free education again from nursery to university. But based on the experiences of the 70s, especially in the 80s in Guyana, we had a number of young Guyanese benefiting from education, but decided to leave Guyana. We need our youths to be educated and to focus on contributing to the development of Guyana. The African youth must take his education and must remain in Guyana to contribute to the development of Guyana. Especially some of our young people who got scholarships to go overseas, to universities in Europe, in North America, and other parts of the world, you know, come back home and contribute to the development of Guyana. That is an important aspect of African leadership that we need to promote.
Yes. Thank you very much, PM-elect. And we'll close with you, Steve.
Well, thank you for coming in as the night watchman. You know, coming after PM and Joe again, there's very little for me to say, but I would just want to underline again the serious approach that we as African Guyanese need to take, the approach to education. And education meaning all-round education. It doesn't mean academics alone. Also the pooling of our ideas and making our ideas work. It is very important that we do that. And also leadership. We have found that leadership within the African Guyanese department has been lacking. So leadership is also a very, very important aspect of us moving forward as a people.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. PM-elect, Mr. Hamilton, Mr. Ninvalle. We want to thank you very much for giving your thoughts and insights on our parents and how they've helped us as a people today. And we have, as Joe would put it, the lighter load to carry. We just need to focus on moving the country forward. You guys mentioned education as key to us integrating and making good gains for Guyana as we integrate with all of the other races to make this country of ours a more prosperous and progressive nation. Gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for giving us your time and your commitment to this program. It has been very good and insightful for the people of Guyana, especially our young brothers and sisters of African descent. I believe that they will have a lot to take away and to digest, to reflect on as well. And I believe that it's a good departure for them to actually take on board and do their own research. And we're open to having dialogue with any group or groups of individuals who may see it fit to get further information from us. So if you're listening to this program and you want to meet with Mr. Hamilton or Mr. Ninvalle or PM-elect in small groups to have discussions, please feel free to do so. So once again, thank you very much for joining us, and happy emancipation to all of our Guyanese brothers and sisters here in Guyana, and for those who would have been listening in diaspora. Thank you very much once again for joining us. Have a great rest of the
Happy emancipation.
And you,
Happy
thank you very much.
emancipation.